prospect of reducing that frictions at the border to as far as possible. And my right honourable and learned friend also said that he didn't see the trade deals that might come from around the rest of the world. I might say to him, I had today I had lunch with the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and one of the topics we were discussing was precisely a future trade deal between the United Kingdom and New Zealand. And just before members opposite start talking about the size of New Zealand, not just a trade deal with New Zealand, but actually membership of the United Kingdom in the CPTPP.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Prime Minister for advance copy of her statement. All of us share with the Prime Minister an abhorrence and disgust at the bombing that took place in Derry over the weekend, and we're delighted at the efforts of the emergency services that made sure there was no loss of life. But, Mr. Speaker, in the light of that, it was disturbing to see media reports this morning, at least of the potential of the opening up of the Good Friday Agreement. Now, I welcome the comments from the Prime Minister this afternoon, but can she confirm that she will neither seek to amend or add to the Good Friday Agreement in any way? Many of us remember the dark days that Northern Ireland went through. This weekend's attack was a frightening reminder of the fragility of the peace in Northern Ireland. Mr. Speaker, on the subject of talks, the SNP entered willingly into talks with the Prime Minister last week, and we remain ready to engage in those talks on the basis that we can discuss pausing Article 50, taking no deal off the table, and discussing a people's vote. But when the Prime Minister talks about no preconditions, in the letters which have gone back and forward between the two of us, the Prime Minister insists that the United Kingdom must leave the European Union on the 29th of March. Mr. Speaker, that is not consistent with a desire to discuss a people's vote. All preconditions must be taken off the table if we are to engage in meaningful dialogue. The SNP know that the Prime Minister's strategy is now to run down the clock, and I would have to say there is no sign that she's interested in meaningful talks or meaningful change. Prime Minister, take no deal off the table. You tell me that you have no desire for no deal. The Foreign Secretary has no desire for no deal. The Chancellor has no desire for a no deal. The Leader of the Opposition has no desire for no deal. The SNP has no desire for no deal. Neither do the Liberal Democrats, Plaid Cymru or the Greens. So let's stop this charade, because if we were to have a people's vote, we would have to extend Article 50. To say that today the only option is to revoke it is not true, although in our case we would welcome that in any case. Mr. Speaker, on the basis of the result last week of a defeat of 230 votes, the Prime Minister has not come here with fundamental change. This government is a farce. It's an embarrassment, and the leadership is shambolic. The Prime Minister now must step up. We must extend Article 50 and end this impasse by bringing forward a second EU referendum. Do it for all sorts of reasons, but do it for the EU citizens living in the UK and now facing a registration scheme. Now, I am grateful and I congratulate the Prime Minister that the fees have been waived for EU nationals, a campaign that's been led by the Scottish National Party and our government in Edinburgh. It is shameful that those here, many have been here for decades, are being forced to register to stay in their own home. That is the fundamentals of it. Mr. Speaker, not in our name, where is the humanity of this? Mr. Speaker, in Scotland we have another choice. We did not vote for Brexit. We will not be dragged out of Europe by a Tory government we did not vote for. We might not be able to save the UK, but we can save Scotland. We have an escape route from the chaos of Brexit, an independent Scotland. Scottish independence will result in our country being a destination in Europe, a country at the heart of Europe, while the rest of the UK turns inwards and isolated from its European neighbours. Mr. Speaker, we want no part of it.
Prime Minister.
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, he raised a number of issues there. He talked about the issue of the Belfast Agreement. As I said in my statement, this government will not reopen the Belfast Agreement. I've never considered doing that, and I would not do it. So we remain committed to the Belfast Agreement and to maintaining our commitments under the Belfast Agreement. He talked about the question of no deal. He talked about running down the clock. We're not running down the clock. I brought a deal that had been negotiated with the European Union to the House. The House has rejected that. The House has rejected that. But I say once again to the right honourable gentleman, as I did earlier to the Leader of the Opposition and to other members of this House, and it's very simple. You cannot wish away no deal. Either you stay in the European Union or you have a deal. Now, I believe that it is right for us to leave the European Union because that's what people voted for in the referendum in 2016. So if you don't want no deal, if somebody doesn't want no deal, they have to be willing to agree a deal. And the point about sitting down and talking with people across this House is to identify those issues on which it will be possible for us to secure support, to make changes such that we can secure the support around this House. I thank him for his comments about the announcement that we've made today in terms of the fees for the applications for citizens' right. I would commend my honourable friends and members for South Leicestershire, Bexhill and Battle, Chesham and Amersham. But also, this was an issue that was raised by other members across this House. And then finally, I will say to the right honourable gentleman, as I have said before and will continue to say, that for the Scottish National Party to stand up and say that the best economic future for Scotland is to be outside the United Kingdom, is to fly, I have to say to every one of those members who is cheering that thought, that is to fly in the face of economic reality, because the reality is...
Justine Greening.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder whether the Prime Minister and indeed the Leader of the Opposition recognise that with just 2 months to go, the past week has shown that party politics and Westminster will not deliver a resolution on Brexit, because party politics is not the same as Brexit. Brexit is separate to party politics, and so that will not change, and this House will not find a route forward. And she talks about social cohesion, but surely the most divisive thing to do would be for members of this House to vote through her deal, knowing that our communities simply do not want it. And isn't it time for all of us to be honest that Parliament's run out of road? We've been debating for 2.5 years. We could debate for another 2.5 years, and we still wouldn't reach a resolution on Brexit. The only people who can do that now, surely, are the British people.
I say to my right honourable friend, and I recognise the passion with which she is campaigning on this particular issue, but she is assuming that it is not possible to reach an agreement which will secure the support of the House. The purpose of what we are doing at the moment, of talking with parties, of talking with backbenchers across this House, is to find those issues, I've indicated issues in my statement, on which we can move and on which we can then find that support across the House. I believe it is right for us to continue to work for a deal, to leave the European Union on the 29th of March, to do so with a deal that has secured the support of this House.
Ed Miliband.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the Prime Minister, as a litmus test of her flexibility, if this House voted, for example, for membership of a customs union, would she implement that decision?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that, of course, the point about what we're doing in terms of this process is identifying those issues on which there is agreement across this House and that secure the support of the House, of dealing with that with the European Union, but also of being faithful to the referendum and the vote that was cast in the referendum. And I believe that everybody, when we look at this issue, should not only say, should we be leaving the European Union, but should recognise the reasons that lay behind the vote to leave the European Union and deliver on those.
Mr. Ian Duncan Smith.
Speaker, can I welcome my right honourable friend's statement, particularly the part where she said that the EU nationals would have their fee waived. I think the whole House should recognise that, and also her acceptance that there's to be no change to the Belfast Agreement, for that would have opened a can of worms, and I recognise that completely. But she's also made clear, as someone who did not support the agreement last week, that she will now go forward and seek further change, and I welcome that. But in doing that, I wonder whether she has given further thought that, given that although she remains absolutely, completely in overall charge, whether she would insert a senior politician in those day-to-day negotiations to ensure that the political ramifications of this are taken carefully into consideration.
Can I say to my right honourable friend? Can I say to my right honourable friend, these negotiations at this stage are for politicians. Indeed, I will continue to have a role in that. The Secretary of State will have a role in that as well as we go forward. But what we need to ascertain first is where we can ensure that we can secure the support of this House for a deal, and then take that forward to the European Union.
Vincent Cable.
Could I